Welcome to Post-Traumatic Thriving, where we explore life's toughest issues, along with the art, science, and stories of resilience. Please be advised that our guests share their raw stories of addiction, abuse, crime, and tragedy, along with tips to survive and thrive. And now, here are our hosts, Dr. RandallBell and Tanya Brown.
Welcome back to Post-Traumatic Thriving. I am your host, Dr. RandallBell. I'm here with Tanya Brown. Hey, Tanya.
Hey, Randy. Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. And welcome to our guest, Rhonda Hart. Welcome to Post-Traumatic Thriving. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I just spent yesterday in Austin, and I'm coming down from that, I was protesting, and I'm coming down from that, endorphin and that, that high. And I have to get back into normal life today and tomorrow.
I have never been described as being part of normal life.
Yeah. What's normal? Let's define that.
Right.
Well, we'll do our best. If this is normal, we'll do our best to welcome you back into normal life.
It's all good.
Yeah. So, Rhonda, your story really caught our eye because I work in the field of disaster recovery projects, and one of my cases was Sandy Hook. And people ask me all the time, what are the very worst cases you've worked on? Is it the World Trade Center or Flight 93? They're all horrific. But anytime a child is affected, that takes it to a whole new level. And when I worked on Sandy Hook and I met with the chief of police, I met with the mayor, and of course saw the community. I was in the shooter's home, which was a crazy experience. It brings the harshest kind of electrical charge of trauma. And Rhonda, you're really, as I say, an important guest because you're an actual face of what is going on behind these headlines when it comes to these school shootings. And we're going to get to the actual day that we're talking about with you. But I'd like to first kick things off, Rhonda, with just asking you, introduce yourself, where you're born, your childhood, your growing up years, and kind of share with us who you are.
Okay. So I am Rhonda Hart, mom to Kimberly and Tyler Vaughn. And I was born in Norfolk, Nebraska. I'm a Cornhuskers girl at heart. When I was I think it was the middle of third grade, my dad and my mom moved us up to a little town called Wasilla, Alaska, which gained some notoriety a few years ago with a certain vice presidential candidate. And whenever I go home, I always make it a point to I get an ice cream cone at the place across the street, and then I drive over and I say hi to her house. And then, I graduated high school. I needed some money for college, so I joined the military.
Thank
you. I needed the money. And then I was active duty on 9/11. I watched we were just talking about World Trade Center. I watched that on real time on the TV, and I was 3 hours away from Washington, D.C. in Newport News, Virginia. And so we went to complete shutdown because we thought that, it was Washington, D.C., it was Pittsburgh. We thought it was New York, D.C., Pittsburgh, and we thought for sure it was going to move down the whole coast. And so we were shut down. Made it through 9/11. I was married for a while. My husband, we lived in Juneau, Alaska. And then after Juneau, Alaska, I said, I'm going to need some amenities. And we ended up in Galveston County, Texas, and in the Santa Fe ISD school district. I got divorced and I had to stay in Galveston County for custody purposes. And so that's how I ended up staying in Santa Fe ISD for all those years. In 2011, I got hired on with the school transportation department. And so I was an employee for Santa Fe ISD for quite a while. I became a driver of a big school bus, and then I was a driver trainer. And I was actually on the clock the day of the shooting whenever it happened. I remember pulling up to it was a rough day.
Well, if you
Okay.
don't mind, I just want to kind of go back and fill in some of the details of growing up.
Yeah.
It sounds, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like kind of your, I don't want to say typical American childhood, but kind of typical in a way.
Yeah.
That, you're kind of moving around the country to
Yep.
interesting places, and we all come
And
from
simple.
someplace associated with someone famous, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah. And by the way, Alaska is my happy place.
I love Alaska,
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I've been to Juneau.
I love Alaska. It's absolutely stunning.
I was just up there fishing with my son, but we were more in Anchorage and then Seward, that area.
Yeah. Yep. I've been there.
Yeah. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't hear of any real trauma associated with your childhood. Was it a pretty healthy, normal childhood?
Yeah. Like your family, siblings.
If I sit here and think about it, my parents divorced when I was in 4th or 5th grade, and we ended up staying. And this didn't happen in the 90s very often. We ended up staying with my dad, was our primary parent, and he got remarried really quickly. I had, that stereotype, like that terrible stepmom and terrible stepbrothers. And it was pretty complicated. If I sit here and think about it, I've learned now I have a mom. I didn't know then really what was going on, but I have a mom with some pretty significant memory issues. And they were showing even when I was a child. And so there's a lot of, I know what it is now. It's called parentification, where the kid is basically providing support for the parent. So there was a lot of that, when I was growing up as a kid. And it was a little complicated. I was sad to leave home and join the Army, but at the same time, I was not.
Yeah. Do you have any? So you mentioned step siblings. Do you have any siblings of your own?
Yeah. So I have. So I'm the oldest of my sibling group. So I have two younger brothers that are in my sibling group, and then I have an older half brother from my dad's first marriage. So yeah.
Okay. Well, then it sounds like these kind of childhood things with parents getting divorced and
that's trauma.
Siblings, that is.
Oh yeah.
That can be messy. But it sounds like you weathered through this pretty well, and you went into the military, which is wonderful in terms of it got you
out.
It got you the money you needed for further education, I think is one way to put it. Yep. And also you're doing service for the country, which is we're grateful for. Anything else you want to kind of fill us in with your childhood, your family growing up, your marriage, your divorce, before we get to that awful day?
Oh yeah. So I was married at I was 20 when I got married, and we were kind of in a serious relationship, and then honest to goodness, 9/11 happened, and we both knew that there was a chance that we were going to go to war, and we didn't want to go to war without the other person. And so we went and got married, and had children very, very quick. I think we were married in 2001, and Kimberly was born in 2003. And then Tyler was born in 2007. And the marriage was different. It was on again, off again. He had some extreme mental health issues going on that I didn't know about until about 10 years later on down the road. And yeah, it was a really contested divorce. It took about a year when all was said and done in Galveston County courts. And I am so happy to be divorced and very happily single, and I enjoy my independence. And I have been doing so for several years now.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. Out of this whole thing with your family and the stepmother and the step siblings, and any kind of life philosophies that you had kind of developed up to this point, or were things kind of cruising along once your divorce was final and everything?
Yeah, things were just after the divorce, things like the whole world just kind of opened up. I started, like I said, I became a school bus driver trainer. I started competing this is an actual thing. School bus drivers have a statewide and nationwide safety competition, and they call it the rodeo. It's a little play on words. And I was able to place at the state level of competition. I went on to place at the national level one year. It was amazing. And everything was going really good. I thought I had found my passion in school transportation. I had wanted to move up through the ranks and become an assistant director and maybe even a director at some point, I wanted to do routing. I wanted to do all this stuff. I really wanted to, retire with a school district, maybe not with Santa Fe ISD, but, I definitely thought that I had found my calling,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. I had no idea there were school bus driver competitions.
I had no idea. In fact, a high school friend of mine is a school bus driver. He's probably retired by now, but he loved it. I mean, cruising up to our old junior high schools and our high school, and he enjoyed that. But yeah, I had no idea. But yeah, it seems like your life was going smoothly. Did you and your siblings, did you guys ever fight? Did you get along? Like, what was that dynamic?
We fought like cats and dogs. It was dreadful. Step siblings versus biological siblings. I was the only girl. I had all boys. We fought in all sorts of configurations. And, something that we never really did as a blended family was we never did like family therapy, and, we never got all on the same page. And that really impacted us and our sibling relationships. I do not keep in touch with my stepbrothers. I do not keep in touch with my former stepmom. If I see them, actually, when I go around town, when I'm home in Wasilla, I tend to turn the other way and, advert, pivot and walk, basically. And so that's something that has really shaped my life right now. Is I got divorced in 2015, and I think my son he was about 10. Yeah, he was 9 or 10, I think, when I got divorced. And, I've told him and my ex-husband has been remarried twice in 6 or 7 years. And so I've told my son now, he's getting older. I said, I'm not going to get remarried again until you're 18. You've been exposed to 2 step parents already and 2 sets of step siblings. And that's pretty much what I had been put through. And I said, I'm not ever going to do that to you, Tyler. I said, I'm going to wait till you're at least 18 before I get remarried. And he's 15 and a half now. So like I'm in the home stretch. Like I might as well just do it. Like what's 2.5 more years?
Exactly. I think that's, I don't want to say the right thing to do, but I think that's the kind thing to do as a parent.
Yeah.
I think it's kind. I think too many. Yeah, go ahead.
I heard there's some kind of ratio that says like for every 4 years that you're married, you should take 1 year totally off and be single and not do anything. So I'm totally succeeding at that.
Me too.
Well, what I like about where we are so far with your story is that you got to a place that worked for you, where you were you'd been through some somersaults, you've been through some highs and lows as but you had kind of landed in a happy spot. I'm kind of interested that, with bus driving, I used to chat with the bus driver that picked up my kids when they took the bus, and he was a really interesting guy, and he had clearly, took his job seriously and the safety of the children seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize it, but he got to his job way early, and there was a full inspection they did on the tires and the brakes and the lights. Let's think about it. You got how many kids in there? 30, 40? I don't know. What's the capacity?
So for elementary school, a lot of your buses now have 26 seats, and you can fit 3 little behinds because the seat bench is 39 inches. And so you can fit 3 little behinds in each seat. So I'm not super good at math, but 26 times 3 is about 70 kids on a fully loaded bus.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot of kids, and their safety and lives depend on the competence and safety of the driver and the
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't even too long ago where the buses had, where they didn't have that stop sign that came out. And how many times, I don't know about you, Randy, how many times do we drive through Laguna Beach and that little stop sign in the back of the bus pops out and nobody ever stops? And that came from a parent who lost a kid who was crossing a street, so advocacy happens from trauma and tragedy, but there's safety measures that, my gosh, you're carrying 70 kids and you think that you're sending your kids off to school, and we'll get to this, thinking that they'll come home. And sadly, some of them don't.
Well, that is the sad truth.
Yeah.
Getting back to the timeline though. So tell us, I'm really kind of intrigued with this bus competition.
Mm-hmm.
Is this like a monster truck rally, or what is this?
I see it like a whole bunch of big yellow buses going down like in NASCAR or something.
No. No. So I competed. So there's a regular 40-foot bus challenge, and that is a written test, and then an obstacle course. And you drive an obstacle course. Obviously, you're going to drive very slowly. And you have like a backup alley, you have a sharp turn, you have to drive your wheels between like 2 soda cans with tennis balls on them and not knock down any tennis balls. So it's all completely accuracy, right? And then I competed in the special needs division, and we had a written test, we had an obstacle course, but because we were a special needs category, we also had to do a thing where with our obstacle course, we would have adult actors, and they would have disabilities, and my driver would have to manage the bus and the driving, and our student actors would be acting up and having their disability complications, and I would have to provide student management. And then at another obstacle course, we had the same actors, and we had to stop the bus, and they would read us like an emergency situation scenario, and we would have to evacuate everybody, and we would have to do it in the quickest amount of time possible, and account for everybody's disability. If Joey is blind and Susie's in a wheelchair, and Becky has her service dog with her, the service dog got thrown to the back of the bus in the accident. We would have to account for everybody, give the dog CPR, get the wheelchair off the bus, all of that. And it was great. I was asked to do it, and I thought, yeah, sure, that's fine. I'm super competitive. We can do this. And sure enough, we got the chance to go to nationals in spring of 2015. It was great. I'd
That's
do it again in a
intense.
heartbeat.
That's crazy.
It was
intense.
intense.
I like the
It was
fact that
really-
you give. I love the fact that you give CPR to the dog. I actually, my nephew actually had to give the Heimlich to our pit bull one time. So I mean,
That was an extra 10 bonus points that day, believe it or not.
Wow.
it's all about the dogs.
Well, it's interesting because you see the pilots at the airport and you have so much respect for their training and their this and that. But what you're kind of describing and what little I know from my conversations with this bus driver gentleman years ago, there's the same kind of thing going on here with bus drivers that we don't think about much. And yet there's a lot that goes behind it. And it's a critically important thing because we're talking about our kids.
Yeah, we don't even think about it. And I still remember my bus driver from kindergarten and elementary, Bill Burns. And then when I got to junior high, her name was Di. I still remember.
Wow. Neat.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. I mean, you're looking at a 23,000 pound vehicle hurtling down the road at 50 miles an hour. What could go wrong?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Everything.
Right.
And like I said, I did the safety competition. I, sometimes would get employee of the month. People would ask, the new drivers would come to me and they'd say, Rhonda, I've got this student management issue. What do I do? Well, this is what you do. This is how you fix it. This is how you make it more safe. And I was always about, I want Johnny can't sit down. So I would call Johnny's mom, look, he needs to sit down because God forbid if I get rear-ended and he's standing up, his spine will bend 90 degrees the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And God forbid something happens to your child.
Yeah.
I couldn't live with myself if one of my students got hurt.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness there's you and people like you that take all this very seriously because as a parent, we're running around trying to get to work and we take a lot of things for granted. But that adds a really interesting kind of layer and dimension too.
Yeah. So parents, thank your school bus drivers at the end of the year and get them a Christmas present too.
Yeah. I mean,
for real.
Good advice.
Everything in hindsight, the big station wagon when you're a kid, right? And mom had, 4 girls and, the whole reaching behind the back seat as she's driving. I mean, there's a lot of dynamics. There's noise, right?
Yep.
Kids are crying, they're screaming, they're laughing, they're throwing stuff. I mean, it's not like the bus driver is just driving. There's, a ton of stimulation going on. So yeah,
you might get to deal with vomit and bloody nose and a
lot of hyper focus. You need to be focused.
Yeah.
Yep.
We don't take that into account.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Well, thanks for kind of filling in some of the gaps and on who you are. Let's go to where you were going and tell us about that day. And first of all, tell us what day it was that we're talking about.
So it was May 18th, 2018. And it was like a normal day at school. It was supposed to be a normal day. I had woke up early as you do, because I think I used to wake up at like 4:15 or 4:30 because I had to leave the bus lot I picked up my first student at 5:55 in the morning. So I had a very tight schedule. So I woke up early and I woke up my younger son and he would come to work with me and then he would kind of like doze in the seat in the mornings. And Kimberly was old enough. She was in 9th grade and she was catching the bus from our house in the morning. And I was totally okay with that because she was a big kid now. And I remember it was a really like dicey day on the radio. Like some of the routes, like a student had missed a stop or one of the other drivers had missed a road or something was going on. And there was a lot of radio traffic that day. And I had finished my route and I had got to the high school and I sat off to the side with my bus and my kids because the driver that drove Kimberly's route, she helped me shuttle my junior high kids to the next to the next campus. Like we would drive by each other, we would give each other the thumbs up. And that was like our signal that, hey, I've got you, just send your kids up to me, or send your kids back or whatever. And, it was towards the end of the year. And so like some of the seniors were bringing their caps and gowns in, and we finally got to the parking lot, and I had connected with Kimberly's bus driver, who was behind me. So my junior high students were going to go, and just walk behind and get on that other bus. And, we had some time we have like 5 or 7 minutes or something to talk in the parking lot. And I was just talking, shooting the breeze with my kids as I did, because that's just like the kind of driver that I was. And I handed this girl had put her cap and gown down like by my floor, by my seat, so she didn't have to hold on to it. And I was like, that's fine. So I handed her gown, and one of my junior high kids was like, "Ooh, is that Kimberly's?" And I said, "Nope, I'm not ready for that yet. Hardy har har." And then they were getting off the bus, and I always said goodbye to everybody as they were leaving. And because again, that's the kind of driver I was. And Kimberly walked by me, and I looked at her, and a lot of the time we would do the American Sign Language sign for "I love you." Like it was just something we had done since kindergarten. And I looked at her, and I remember like looking through the windows, and she was like looking through my door, and she kind of looked over her shoulder, and I saw her gray hoodie that she had stole from me. And I was like, "Bye, Kim, I love you." And she kind of smirked, and she went into the hallway, she went into the school. And like that was the last time I ever saw her. And I'm really glad that, the last thing I ever said to her was something positive, and then I got the kid, the students went to the other bus. I went to the transportation center to take a quick bathroom break. And then I went and started my elementary school route, which again had to start right on time. And I did the whole thing. I had just picked up like my last kid. I remember where I was on Avenue L in Santa Fe. And they came over the radio, and they said, like, "Attention, all bus drivers. There's been a safety concern. Please pull your buses over and wait for further instruction." So I pulled my bus over, I turned on my hazards, and, like my kids were squirrely at the end of the year. We had like 2 weeks of school left. They were really feeling it. So I was like giving them a pep talk, like, "Hey, you guys can hang in there with your good behavior, and you can do it. And like, don't make me call your moms, because I don't, don't make me call your families, because I really don't want to have to do that. Like, let's just get this done, And then we got the all clear to advance to the elementary schools, because at the time we were dropping off certain grade levels at one campus, and then the younger kids we were dropping off at another campus. And I got to the end of my like little side street, and I got onto a major, we call them farm to market roads here, but it's basically 5 lanes, with the turning lane in the middle. So it's two lanes, turning lane, and then 2 other lanes. And I got to that farm to market road, and I kept seeing like Lamarck police, Hitchcock police. And then I got to the next major intersection, and it was like, here comes Dickinson PD. And all these police cars were just like flying down the road, right, towards the high school. And I remember thinking like, God damn it, there's been an accident over there, and like traffic's going to be bad at the high school. Because like every 4 or 6 weeks, there was always an accident in front of the high school, right? New drivers, bad drivers. It never failed. And then I got to the first elementary school, and we normally had like 2 or 3 gates open where we could drop off the kids in the morning. Maybe it was like 4, but we had a certain like window of space where we could drop the kids off. And I noticed like right away, like all those options are gone except for one. There's one entry point. And I was like, that's really weird. And then I noticed that the head principal was on the bus pad in the morning. And I was like, you know what? Morning bus duty is below her pay grade. She's not supposed to be here right now. This is like lower, this is someone like lower on the chain of command. You would do like a regular teacher would be out there, or like one of the special education para educators would be out there. It would be like a lower ranking staff. And I remember thinking like, why is Destiny Martin out here? That's really weird. And then I got to the next elementary campus and I was unloading those kids, and there was a little bit more staff out, and they were running around kind of like chickens with their heads cut off, and their eyes were kind of bugging out. And I thought, you know what? Again, that's really like my military training is kicking in. Like something is clearly not right. And then they told all the bus drivers to get to the high school, but to take the back route because Highway 6 was closed. And I was like, this has got to be a major accident. And I managed to get to the high school. I was one of the last buses to get there because my elementary route took so long. And I remember rolling up, and I was one of the last buses to fit in our little configuration and all the little parking spots. And there was fire trucks, EMS, helicopters, police cars, everything was going on. And I was like, oh, fuck, this is not good. I just remember thinking like, oh yeah, something definitely is going on. And by that time, we had all started to check our social media pages, which we weren't allowed to be on our cell phones when we were on the clock. That was just a general rule to keep us from, like, clearly there was no cell phone usage when you were driving behind the wheel. And so they just had, really extended that to like, if you were waiting in a parking lot for 5 or 10 minutes, you weren't supposed to be on your phone. But everybody started pulling out their phones, and that's when like the rumors were hitting Facebook that there was a shooter in the building. And it was first reported that he was in the art class. And I was like, shit, Kimberly's got first period art. And then it was said he was in the health class, and then it was brought back and confirmed he was in the art class. And I think I can't remember the time. I have to look it up, but I texted her at like 8:30 in the morning. I was like, are you okay? Can you read this? Where are you? Or something small. And I never, ever heard back from her. And we had been sitting there for a while, and it was confirmed that it was in the art class, and I hadn't heard from her. And they were bringing kids out of the building, and they were taking them to the reunification point. And I went down there and I started talking to some like SWAT team or police team or whatever. And I was like, hey, I'm a staff member. My kid was in that art class. I haven't heard from her. And they're like, what was she wearing? And da 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 da. And then one of my students, Isabel, came running out of the building. And Isabel was a freshman, and I had been her driver since elementary school. So I really was attached to this kid and her brother. I watched them grow up. And she came running out of that building, and I went over and I hugged her so hard that the police thought she was my biological kid. And they asked me, they're like, is she your kid? And I said, well, I'm her driver, but she's not my biological kid. And they're like, okay, you can take her to a bus and get her to the safety point. And I was like, okay. So I got Isabel onto a bus. We were running certain buses with air conditioning to keep cool for the kids that were coming out. And I got her on a bus and I got her in air conditioning and we were crying and she was telling me what was going on. And she told me, she was like, Miss Rhonda, I think Kimberly died. She's like, I think I saw her on the floor. Because when they were evacuating the kids out of the art class, they didn't tell them to not to look at the floor. They didn't tell them to, like, you know, keep your eyes up. And Isabel, like, saw her friends dead on the floor. And she told me, she was like, I think Kimberly's dead. And I just thought in my head, like, no, it's not happening. It's not happening. And Isabel got back over to the reunification point. And then at some point, they decided that they didn't need the school bus drivers there in the parking lot because, like, other school bus drivers from other districts had come over from, like, Alvin or Clear Creek or something. And so they let the Santa Fe bus drivers go. And I remember taking, I was so shook up, and I still don't know how I did it, but I was, like, just terrified. And I took a trainee that I was working with, and I was like, hey, like, you're going to be my emotional support person until I get back to the bus barn. And I remember parking my bus in its assigned spot, and I did my walk around to make sure that nobody was left and that everything was secured, and I filled out my paperwork and I put my keys away. And then my cell phone was my battery was just about gone. So I grabbed a charging cord and a cube from the office that they let me borrow, because everybody knew, like, by this time, everybody knew there was a shooting, and we knew that we hadn't heard from Kimberly yet. And she was like a bus barn kid, like she had grown up there. And so they were like, go, Rhonda, go to the gym and get there and wait for her. And I was like, okay. So I did. And I got there, I got to the old gym, and I checked in with Kimberly's old principal, Miss Ross. And I was like, look, her first name was also Kim. And I was like, look, Kim, I haven't heard from my Kim yet. And so then they took us to the old administration building. And that was where all the parents were waiting. And a few of my coworkers came in and sat with me. The other families came and sat with me, like Kyle McLeod's mom. We had been in Girl Scouts together. We were leaders. So we sat in the same room for a long time. And, there's like talking to other survivors of other mass shootings. There's a checklist, and there's like a timeline that they sit you in another room, and then someone brings in pizza and someone brings in coffee. And then here come the emotional support dogs and the therapy dogs. And here comes the Red Cross and then the FBI. And then you're going to get the police department. And so it was all these things. And my friends were coming in and, like, clocking out early. My friend Laura May clocked out early from her job, and she brought me Panera so I could have something to eat. And they kept telling us that there was an incident, and then there was bombs found, and they were waiting to check and see if the bombs were safe or not, or detonated, and then like mid-afternoon, another FBI agent came in and told us that there was a delay and this, that, and the other thing. And Riley Garcia's mom and me and Kyle McLeod's mom, we just lost our shit on this FBI agent. And we were swearing at her and I mean, just unleashing because we didn't know what was going on with our kid. And at that point, I couldn't stand to sit around anymore. And my friend Laura May had her car. And I was like, Laura May, I got to go to the hospitals. We got to go. I can't sit here. So we drove up to Clear Lake Regional Emergency Room. And I remember storming into that emergency room and they had the big TVs on and they were showing live coverage from the footage from the shooting at the high school. And I remember like storming up to the nurse's desk and I was like, my kid was in that class and she was in that building. And is she here now? Because I haven't heard from her. And the charge nurse came around. She's like, what's your kid's name? And I said, it's Kimberly. And the charge nurse said, I checked everybody in from that shooting myself and I haven't seen your kid. So we went to Hospital of the Mainland and it was the same thing. And then Laura and I went to the AT&T store because we thought for sure if Kimberly had her cell phone on her, which she did. And I would like to make a point that whenever in the crime scene shows, they're like, ooh, we just pinged the victim's cell phone and that's how we found them. That's not how that works. Okay. So we went to AT&T and I said, could you please do the cellular tower thing? Could you please ping her phone and tell us where she is? Because a lot of the kids, like, there was no plan for a mass shooting that day. And the shooting was going on. And the way everybody knew to get out was that someone had pulled the fire alarm. And the kids just kind of scattered. Some of them ended up in the woods behind the school. Some of the kids crossed across the street to the highway. Some of them went, to the football field. Some of them ended up at the gas station down the road. So everybody just like scattered like the wind. And it was also school policy that they didn't have to wear their ID badges around there on a lanyard at all times. They just had to have the badges like in their backpack in case they were questioned. And at the time, I don't think those ID badges there's technology with certain badges that you can put a RFID chip in and it'll track like generally where the kid goes. And then it really fires off when the kid decides to play hooky and leave campus, but they didn't have that technology that day. So they really didn't know where everybody went. Like some kids, like I said, lived across the street from the high school. So they like ran across the highway, jumped the railroad tracks and just went to their house. And so we were at the AT&T store and they did not have the ability to track Kimberly's phone, but we got some of like the most frequent numbers that she had called or texted and wrote those down. And I started calling her little friends to see if they would answer, which they didn't. And by that time it was like 4 or 5. And I was like, you know what, Laura May, I can't do this AT&T thing. I need to go home. I need to go and see if she's at the house because in case she got a ride home somehow. And we were on our way to her house. We were on 646 in Bay Colony. And my friend Jamie called me, and Jamie and I used to run a Girl Scout troop together, and we still kind of kept in touch. And she's like, hey, Rhonda, you should come back down to Santa Fe because there's an update. And I was like, no, I don't want to go to Santa Fe. I'm going to go to my house. And she's like, no, really, you should come down to Santa Fe because it's the end of the day and they have news and all this. And I was like, fuck that. But I went. Laura May and I we went back to Santa Fe, and we went back to the reunification point. And by that time, it was just a handful of families left. And they had us like in the foyer. I just talked about this with Rosie Stone yesterday. They had us in the foyer of this old administration building. And we were all kind of formed in like this half moon, like this crescent shape around this really tall Texas Ranger. And they have a certain look about them. Like they always have to wear a button down and a tie and a certain cowboy hat and khakis. And he was like, well, there's no really delicate way to say this. And someone piped up, no, take him and go sit him down. And they took us around the corner and they lined us up in this hallway, and it was the family members on one side, and then there was a door on the other side, and then it was like the staff members. So like we were lined up against the lockers, and like the top district staff was lined up on the wall opposite of us. And I remember looking at essentially my boss in the face, my superintendent and my head of HR. And I just remember the absolute look on their face. And the agents came out and they started calling names. And Kimberly was like the second or third name that they called. And by then, a lot of my coworkers had clocked out from the end of routes. And my director of transportation was there. And they sat me in this room. And it was kind of ironic because the walls was painted like really pretty, like blue and white fluffy clouds. And they sat me down in this chair, and the Dickinson chaplain, the Dickinson Police Department chaplain, sat me down. And before he could start his sentence, the family next door to me got the news, and they started screaming, like just this huge gut-wrenching scream. And then he told me that Kimberly had been shot and killed. And my world just like opened up. You know, that's the last thing you ever think of. But I remember it was like maybe like 5:15 or something. And I just felt like, you know what? I would have heard from her by now. She was not one to just be quiet. She would have sent me like a fart emoji or something by now. She would have texted me something. And I just remember it slid into place before they told me. I was like, I think she's gone. Like, you know, in your mom's heart. And then when they told me, it was just like, well, fuck this. You know, there's lots of swearing. There was screaming. There was crying. I think my legs gave out at some point. Yeah, it was bad. And then they kind of let us calm down a little bit and like stop the crying. And I remember just being so like completely famished by this time. Like my lunch had worn off. And Laura May was like, well, so Laura May got me out of there and drove me around. And she said, well, where do you want to go? And I said, you know what? I just want soup, salad, and breadsticks. And of all the places, we went to Olive Garden after a mass shooting, and we sat there in our little corner and ate soup, salad, and breadsticks, and just kind of decompressed. And it was the wildest thing that we were sitting there with this like complete and utter level of loss, and all these other patrons, in the restaurant were just like, la-di-da, we're eating, lasagna and meatballs. And, it's like, it didn't even faze them, It was crazy. I don't think I slept that night very much. And the next morning we had to get up and go to the resiliency center, which was like the command center that they set up. And all of the stuff had to be arranged. We had to talk to the district attorney. We had to talk to the OAG. We had to pick a funeral home. We had to check in with the Red Cross. It was like we had this big checklist of things to do, even though none of us wanted to do it. And yeah. And then at some point, it was like midday, and we didn't know officially what was going on. My friend Heidi had texted me, and her son and Tyler were in the same class that year. And she's like, Rhonda, do you want me to get Tyler and get him out of here? And I was like, yeah, take him. You have my permission. And so she took Tyler and her son that night. And during the shooting, like, she got him out of the school. She went and took him, and like they did race cars or something. They went to a movie. So Tyler had a normal night that night of the night of the shooting. He didn't even know. And I had to pick him up the next day from his friend's house. And I took him to Sonic and got him a Sonic meal. And that whole time he was like, where's Kimberly? Where's Kimberly? And I drove him to our family therapist, and I had to sit down and tell him the next morning what had happened to his big sister. And that sucked. That was awful. But we had to do it, obviously. And yeah, that was like shooting day. That was shooting day and like the day after.
So Rhonda, thanks for pushing through the story that is just heart-wrenching to hear. I can't imagine what you're going through, even retelling it. I just need to ask you, I'm trying to get a time frame. What was the time of the actual shooting, and what was the time that you actually learned about it?
So it's always the time frame for your standard mass shooting, but talking to like other families from like Parkland. I remember talking to Parkland for the first time, and our shooting, it's usually 10 to 12 hours from shots fired to family identification. Wow. So our shooting happened at about 7:45 in the morning, and we didn't find out till it had to have been 5:30, 6 o'clock. And so that's what happened when I finally got to meet another, because we're the shooting after Parkland. And so shooting survivors, it's not like there's an official registry, and it's not like there's an official like phone book of shooting survivors, but you go to like these events, and you go to like these massive, like the Newtown Action Alliance holds a vigil around Christmas time. And so you go to an event and you get to meet like other shooting survivors. And so you get to network and form like friendships with these other families. We call it unofficially the Dead Kid Club. And I remember talking to Manny and Patricia Oliver for the first time. And I was like, did it take you guys forever to find out what had happened to your kid? And they're like, yeah. So their shooting happened in the afternoon around 2 or 3. And they didn't find out the status of their kid until like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And I just talked to, I was in Austin yesterday with March for Our Lives. And I got to meet Uvalde families for the first time on Friday and Saturday. And it was the same for them. I have to look up the timing of their shooting, but they didn't find out about their kids until like midnight. And in the middle of all that, they had to take a DNA test because their kids were so annihilated that nobody could recognize them.
Oh my gosh.
They were able to identify our bodies. But I can't imagine, like I told them, I said, I can't imagine that weight. And then the inhumanity of having to take a DNA test in the middle of it, in front of God and everybody. They had to do it in public, in front of everybody at the unification point. Anyway, but that's Uvalde. We'll talk about that later.
Wow.
But yeah, it's 10 to 12 hours is standard operating procedure to identify victims of a mass shooting.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And to add a little more dimension to the scope of the problem, I remember when I've worked on several mass shooting cases, the Pulse nightclub, Sandy Hook, I mentioned, and there are others. And when I was working on school shootings, I would get these lists of school shootings throughout the country. And I was shocked at how many there are that don't hit the major national news. It's horrific.
Yeah. A friend of mine who works down in San Diego for KUSI, he had posted, it was just, I mean, the list went on and on. I mean, there must have been like 30 that don't even hit the news media.
Yeah.
So
they're
tragic.
It's literally, and I didn't realize it until I talked to Manny Oliver for the first time. And he was like, at what point did they at what point did they take you to a reunification point? At what point did they bring in the pizza? When did the service dogs come in? When did the chaplains come in? Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And there is a definite, anybody that has been through a shooting before, there's a definite like list, and we can all compare like our same experiences.
Yeah.
Of course.
And I gotta say that first responders are being traumatized too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I've seen policemen, FBI, police chiefs in closed meetings, one-on-one, or just another person there, and they break down too. I mean, I don't know that we want to have a pile on first responders and how they manage this, but I just want to acknowledge that they are traumatized. You mentioned the school shooting where the bodies were not recognizable. Well, imagine being a dad.
Oh my God.
And also you happen to be a sheriff, and you have to try and sort this out. And then you have to convey this information to parents. And you know how you're traumatized. They're going to be, everybody's just off the needle traumatized. Yep. So I don't want to pile on, but I do want to recognize the horrific experience you went through. I don't know what can be done about that. Maybe we'll talk about that in the next episode, but I
mean, that's why we see so much suicide and mental health issues within our first responders, whether they're sheriffs, fire, therapists, etc.
Yeah. And as tough as this conversation is, it's necessary because you can't fix something you ignore.
Right.
And turning the lights on. And, Rhonda, thank you so much for your bravery in talking about this.
Yeah. I also want to say too, it's like, knowing that you've lost your kid, or knowing that she's not responding to your text messages, she's not calling you. Oh. I mean, it's like just that anticipation alone, and then getting that final call. Yeah. And, I'm not a mom, but I've witnessed that phone call of my parents, and that, losing a sister was one thing, but witnessing your parents go through it. So I will never say I know what you're going through. I don't understand. I mean, I understand what you're going through, but I would never ever say I know what you're going through ever. But I have witnessed that call, and it's horrific.
Yeah,
it's horrific.
I still to this day don't know who was in the room on the other side of me, but I will never forget that scream, ever. Yeah. And I haven't talked about shooting day in its entirety in a long time. This is the first time that I've talked about it in quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we appreciate that. We do.
Yeah.
Because you're
talking
like
the whole. Yeah.
You're sharing stories. You're speaking to the other moms and the dads and the siblings who have, experienced the exact same thing that you've gone through. So, here on this podcast, it's just us, but you're reaching so many people, by sharing your heart and your experience.
Yeah. Well,
I hope so. I hope that this is like, we'll get to this at some point, but this is why, like, I fight so hard to get common gun laws passed, common sense gun laws, and why I talk so much about school safety and securing your guns. And because, like, God forbid, I don't want anybody else to have to go through this. Like, this sucks.
Yeah.
This is the fucking, am I allowed to cuss? Can I cuss?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for
this
it.
Is,
Tell your story.
mark that.
Go for it.
This is the fucking worst, right? Like, Kimberly was 14. We were looking at, like, I had gotten over that hill of, difficult parenting, and I was looking at the end of the road with this kid. Like, we were thinking about college, and I was like, woo, I've done it. I've raised a human.
Yeah.
And then it's like, nope, sorry, you did not successfully complete that.
Yeah.
No.
Well, but and we'll get to this as well, but you're honoring Kimberly's memory by your tenacious advocacy. And I'm looking forward to that part of the story. But I think this might be a good time to pause. And then when we come back in the next episode, we'll talk about more of what you went through, but also in the context of rebuilding and kind of the survival stage.
Yeah.
If that's okay. Yeah. Okay.
That was brutal.
Well, yes.
Oh, I could only imagine.
I can't.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine.
Yeah.
But thank you again, and we'll see you on the next episode on Post-Traumatic Thriving, where we dive, survive, or thrive.
The choice is yours.
Thanks for supporting our podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and follow us on your favorite social media. For books, merchandise, or to donate, visit CoreIQ.com. Post-Traumatic Thriving is produced by CoreIQ, a nonprofit with a mission to teach the life skills we all need but are not taught in school. CoreIQ and the Post-Traumatic Thriving podcast are for informational purposes only and do not provide medical or mental health advice. Always consult with your licensed medical and mental health care providers.